If you're so smart, prove it, sneered the Sheikh billionaire. She solved his billion-dollar riddle in front of 500 guests. Emma Carter had learned to be invisible. At 26 years old, she had perfected the art of moving through rooms full of millionaires and celebrities without drawing a single glance. Her black uniform, crisp white apron and pulled-back chestnut hair were her camouflage at the Astoria Grand Hotel in Manhattan, where crystal chandeliers cost more than most people's houses, and a single night in the presidential suite could pay her rent for 6 months. She balanced a silver tray of champagne flutes with practiced ease, weaving between tables of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The grand ballroom buzzed with 500 of the world's wealthiest and most powerful people, all gathered for one man's entertainment. Sheikh Rashid Al-Maktoum. The name alone commanded attention. Oil magnate, tech investor, billionaire with a fortune estimated at $8.7 billion. And tonight's host, Emma, had served at dozens of events like this. But something about tonight felt different. The air crackled with anticipation. Guests whispered excitedly about the Sheikh's famous riddles, the impossible mathematical puzzles he presented at his gatherings, the $10 million prize that no one had ever claimed. She approached a table near the stage, offering champagne with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. A woman in a Chanel dress waved her away without looking up. Emma was used to it. 3 years ago, she had sat at tables like these as Dr. Emma Carter, MIT graduate with a doctorate in applied mathematics and quantum cryptography. 3 years ago, people had listened when she spoke. Then Marcus Whitfield, her fiancé, her research partner, the man she had trusted with everything, stole her doctoral thesis. He published it under his own name, destroyed her reputation with carefully crafted lies, and left her drowning in legal debt from a court battle she couldn't win. The academic world believed him. After all, he was Dr. Marcus Whitfield, respected professor, published researcher. She was just a graduate student with accusations and no proof that would stand up in court. Now her MIT diploma gathered dust in a drawer, and she served drinks to people who would never know she had once been one of them. The lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the stage. Sheikh Rashid Al-Maktoum emerged from behind velvet curtains, and the room fell silent. He was 48 but looked younger, with sharp features, intense dark eyes, and an air of absolute authority. His traditional white thobe and black bisht, trimmed with gold thread, spoke of heritage and power. Every movement was calculated, controlled, commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried effortlessly through the ballroom, accented but perfectly clear, "thank you for joining me tonight. As many of you know, I have a particular fondness for intellectual challenges. I believe true intelligence is the greatest currency in our world, more valuable than oil, more precious than gold." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Emma positioned herself near a pillar, tray balanced, watching despite herself. "Tonight I present a puzzle that has stumped the finest mathematical minds across 3 continents. Professors from Oxford, Cambridge, MIT, Stanford, all have tried and failed." He smiled, and there was something predatory in it. "The prize remains the same. $10 million and a position in my technology division to whoever can solve it. But I warn you, this is not for amateurs." A massive screen descended behind him, displaying an intricate mathematical equation. Emma's breath caught. Even from a distance, she could see it was complex. Number theory, prime sequences, cryptographic algorithms woven together, in a pattern that would take most people hours just to understand, let alone solve. "You have as long as you need," Rashid continued, gesturing grandly to the screen. "Who will be the first to try?" A distinguished man in his 60s stood immediately. "I'll take that challenge, Sheikh Rashid." Professor Harold Chen, Harvard Mathematics Department. Professor Chen, I've read your papers. Impressive work on differential equations." Rashid's smile widened. "Please enlighten us." Emma watched as Professor Chen approached the stage, confidence radiating from every step. He studied the equation for several minutes, occasionally nodding to himself. Then he began to speak, outlining his approach, writing calculations on a digital tablet that projected onto the screen. 5 minutes later, Rashid held up a hand. "Stop. You're going in entirely the wrong direction. The foundation of your approach is flawed." He turned to the audience. "This is what Harvard teaches? How disappointing." Professor Chen's face flushed red. He returned to his seat in humiliated silence. 3 more attempts followed. A CEO of a tech company who claimed to have a degree in mathematics. A young prodigy who had won international competitions. A professor from Cambridge who spent 15 minutes on stage before Rashid cut him off with a dismissive wave. Wrong, wrong, completely wrong. The Sheikh's voice grew colder with each failure. Is there no one here with actual intelligence? Or did you all come simply to eat my food and drink my champagne? Emma felt her jaw tighten. She had seen arrogance before, but this was something else. This was cruelty disguised as intellectual superiority. She glanced at the equation again, and despite herself, her mind began to work. The pattern was familiar. She had seen something similar in her thesis research. A variation of the Goldbach conjecture, combined with Fibonacci sequences in hexadecimal base, layered with cryptographic keys that her thoughts stopped abruptly. She knew this. She could solve this, but revealing herself meant exposure. It meant stepping back into a world that had rejected her, risking humiliation, opening old wounds that had barely begun to heal. Perhaps I've overestimated this gathering, Rashid said, his voice dripping with disdain. He scanned the room slowly, and his gaze landed on Emma. She froze. What about you? The room turned to look at her. 500 pairs of eyes. Emma felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Me? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Yes, you. The waitress. He gestured impatiently. Do you think you can solve it? Or is your intelligence limited to memorizing drink orders? Laughter erupted throughout the ballroom. Not polite chuckles, but genuine mocking laughter. Emma felt heat rising to her cheeks. She saw the faces around her, wealthy, educated, powerful people who saw her as entertainment, as someone so far beneath them that the very suggestion of her attempting the puzzle was hilarious. Something inside her snapped. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something colder, sharper. It was 3 years of silence, 3 years of being invisible, 3 years of watching Marcus Whitfield take credit for her work while she served champagne to people who would never know the truth. Emma set her tray down on the nearest table with deliberate care. She smoothed her apron, lifted her chin and walked toward the stage. The laughter died into confused silence. Rashid's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in his composed expression. She climbed the 3 steps to the stage, her legs steadier than she expected. Up close, the Sheikh was taller than she had realized, and his dark eyes studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she didn't. Instead, she turned to face the screen, and the equation that had defeated some of the brightest minds in the world. If you're so smart, she said quietly, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. Then you'll recognize real intelligence when you see it. She began to work. Emma's fingers moved across the digital tablet with swift precision. The ballroom had fallen into absolute silence. 500 people holding their collective breath as a waitress in a simple uniform stood on stage and did the impossible. The equation appears complex, Emma said, her voice growing stronger with each word. But it's actually an elegant combination of 3 distinct mathematical principles. First, we have a modified Goldbach conjecture. Every even integer greater than 2 can be expressed as the sum of 2 primes. But here the Sheikh has added a twist, she wrote rapidly. Numbers and symbols flowing across the screen. Rashid stood motionless, his expression unreadable. The Fibonacci sequence is embedded in hexadecimal base, which creates a cryptographic layer. Most people would try to solve this linearly, which is why they fail. The key is recognizing that the sequence spirals. It's not a ladder, it's a helix. Her hand moved faster now, confidence building with each calculation. The prime numbers aren't random. They follow a pattern based on the golden ratio, 1.618. When you apply that to the hexadecimal conversion, she paused, double-checking her work. The mathematics flowed through her mind like a language she had been forbidden to speak for 3 years, and now the words poured out in a torrent. She had forgotten how this felt, the pure, crystalline clarity of solving a problem that existed in the realm of absolute truth, where politics and lies and stolen credit couldn't touch the fundamental reality of numbers. The cryptographic key is derived from the intersection points of the Fibonacci spiral and the prime sequence. When you map them onto a 3-dimensional matrix, she created a visual representation on the screen, a beautiful, complex structure that rotated slowly. The solution becomes clear. Emma wrote the final answer, a string of numbers and symbols that looked almost poetic in their arrangement. She stepped back, her heart pounding, and turned to face Sheikh Rashid. 4 minutes and 37 seconds, someone whispered in the audience. The sheikh stared at the screen, then at Emma, then back at the screen. He walked slowly to the display, examining every line of her work with meticulous attention. The silence stretched so long that Emma began to wonder if she had made a mistake, if her mind had betrayed her after 3 years away from serious mathematics. Then Rashid began to laugh. Not the cruel, mocking laughter from before, but something genuine, almost delighted. He turned to the audience, spreading his arms wide. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a winner." His voice rang with something that might have been respect. "Not only is the answer correct, but the explanation is the most elegant I've seen. Professor Chen, are you watching? This is what real mathematical thinking looks like." The ballroom erupted into applause, but it sounded distant to Emma's ears. She felt dizzy, disoriented, as if she had been underwater for 3 years and had just broken the surface. Rashid approached her, and up close she could see genuine curiosity in his dark eyes. "Who are you?" "Emma Carter." "That's a name, not an answer." "Who are you really? Where did you study? Why are you serving champagne instead of teaching at a university or working for a tech company?" His questions came rapid-fire, demanding. Emma hesitated. The old instinct to hide, to protect herself, warred with the exhilaration of being seen again. "I have a doctorate from MIT, applied mathematics with a specialization in quantum cryptography." MIT. He repeated the word as if tasting it. "And yet you're here in a waitress uniform, invisible to everyone in this room until 30 seconds ago. There's a story there." "There is," Emma's voice hardened, "but it's not one I'm interested in sharing with 500 strangers." Something flickered in Rashid's expression. Surprise, perhaps, that she would speak to him so directly. He was clearly a man accustomed to deference, to people bending to his will. Emma had spent 3 years bending. She was done. "The prize," Rashid announced to the room, "is $10 million and a position in my technology division. Dr. Carter, the money will be transferred to your account immediately. And I expect you in my office tomorrow morning at 9 to discuss your new role." "No." The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Rashid's eyes widened fractionally. "No?" He repeated, as if he had never heard the word before. "Thank you for the prize money. I earned it. But I'm not interested in working for you." Emma met his gaze steadily. "I've had enough of powerful men who think they can control everything and everyone around them. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Sheikh Rashid." She walked off the stage, retrieved her tray and disappeared into the crowd before he could respond. Her hands were shaking so badly that the champagne flutes clinked together. But she kept moving, kept her head high, kept breathing. Behind her she heard the Sheikh's voice, quieter now, speaking to someone nearby. "Find out everything about Emma Carter. Everything. I want a full report by tomorrow morning." Emma smiled despite herself. She had just made a very powerful man very curious. She wasn't sure if that was the smartest thing she had ever done or the most dangerous. Possibly both. 2 days later, Emma was finishing her evening shift when the hotel manager approached her with an expression of barely concealed anxiety. "Miss Carter, there's someone here to see you." "In the executive lounge." Emma's stomach tightened. She had a feeling she knew who it was. "I'm not off shift for another hour. He's insistent and he's a very important guest. Please, Emma, just talk to him." She found Sheikh Rashid in the executive lounge, seated in a leather chair that probably cost more than her car, a folder on the table in front of him. He stood when she entered, a gesture of courtesy that surprised her. "Dr. Carter, thank you for meeting with me. I didn't have much choice." Emma remained standing, arms crossed. "What do you want?" "To apologize." The words seemed to cost him something. "My behavior at the gala was unacceptable. I was cruel to the people who attempted the puzzle, and I was condescending to you. I'm not accustomed to being wrong, but I was wrong." Emma studied him, trying to determine if this was genuine or manipulation. "Apology noted. Is that all?" "No." Rashid gestured to the folder. "I had my people research you. Before you get angry, understand that I research everyone I'm interested in working with. What I found—" He paused and something that might have been anger crossed his face. "What I found was an injustice that I cannot ignore. You read about Marcus. It wasn't a question, Dr. Marcus Whitfield. Your former fiancé, your research partner. The man who stole your doctoral thesis on quantum cryptographic algorithms, published it under his own name, and destroyed your academic career when you tried to fight back. Rashid's voice was cold. He's now a celebrated professor at Columbia University, consulting for Fortune 500 companies, making millions from your work. And you're serving champagne. Emma felt her throat tighten. It's not that simple. I couldn't prove it in court. He had connections, resources, lawyers. I had student debt and a reputation he systematically destroyed. The academic world believed him. Case closed. Nothing is ever closed if you have the right resources. Rashid opened the folder, revealing pages of documents, photographs, email records. I've had my investigators digging for 48 hours. Dr. Whitfield has been very careful, but not careful enough. There are digital footprints, timestamps on files, email exchanges with colleagues where he discusses managing you. And more interestingly, you're not his first victim. Emma's breath caught. What? 3 other students over the past decade. All vulnerable, all brilliant, all silenced with threats and legal intimidation. He has a pattern. Rashid's eyes met hers. I want to help you expose him. I want to restore your reputation and make sure he faces consequences for what he's done. Why? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Why would you do that? Because I've spent my entire life in rooms full of people who think power and money make them intelligent. You solved a puzzle in 4 minutes that stumped professors who've studied mathematics for decades. You did it while wearing a Waitress uniform, after being mocked by everyone in that room, including me. That's not just intelligence, Dr. Carter. That's courage. And courage combined with brilliance is the rarest thing in the world. He stood, moving closer but maintaining a respectful distance. I'm offering you a deal. Work for me for 1 year. Develop cybersecurity systems for my companies. In exchange, I'll use every resource at my disposal to expose Marcus Whitfield and restore what he stole from you. My lawyers, my investigators, my connections, all of it. Emma wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed at her to protect herself, to not trust another powerful man with promises. But she looked at the folder, at the evidence he had already gathered in just 2 days, at the possibility of finally getting justice. 1 year, she said, and I want complete creative control over my work. No interference, no micromanaging. Agreed. And I want it in writing. A contract that protects me if you decide to pull the same thing Marcus did. Rashid smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. You're smart to be cautious. I'll have my lawyers draft something by tomorrow. But Dr. Carter, understand this. I didn't build an $8 billion empire by stealing from brilliant people. I built it by recognizing talent and giving it room to flourish. You're going to change everything. Emma shook his offered hand and felt the world shift beneath her feet. She didn't know if she was making the best decision of her life or walking into another disaster. But for the first time in 3 years, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope, Emma's first day at Al-Maktoum. Technologies began in a corner office on the 47th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper with floor-to-ceiling, windows overlooking Central Park. The office was larger than her entire apartment, furnished with sleek modern furniture and equipped with 3 state-of-the-art computer systems that made her fingers itch to start working. Rashid appeared at 9 o'clock exactly, dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that had replaced his traditional attire. He looked every inch the tech mogul, sharp and commanding. Your workspace, he said, gesturing around the office. You'll have a team of 12 engineers reporting to you, but for the first month I want you to work directly with me. I need to understand how your mind approaches problems. Directly with you? Emma raised an eyebrow. Don't you have an empire to run? I have competent people running the day-to-day operations. This project is my priority. He pulled up a chair, sitting across from her desk as if they were equals. It was disconcerting. Tell me about your thesis. The real one, not the version Marcus published. For the next 3 hours, Emma talked. She explained her research into quantum cryptographic algorithms, the breakthrough she had made in creating virtually unbreakable encryption keys using principles of quantum entanglement, the applications for banking security, government communications, medical records. Rashid listened with an intensity that was almost unnerving, asking questions that proved he understood far more about advanced mathematics than she had expected. This could revolutionize cybersecurity, he said finally. No wonder Marcus stole it. The commercial applications alone are worth billions. That's why I couldn't win in court, Emma said bitterly. By the time I realized what he'd done, he had already published, already filed patents, already built a reputation on my work. My word against his, and he was the established professor. Not anymore. Rashid pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. My legal team has been working around the clock. We've found the original drafts of your thesis on an old university server, complete with timestamps and your digital signature. We've also found emails between Marcus and a colleague where he explicitly discusses borrowing your research. It's not enough yet, but it's a start. Emma felt tears prickling her eyes and blinked them back furiously. I spent 2 years trying to find evidence like that. How did you do it in 2 days? Money, connections, and a team of forensic digital investigators who are very good at their jobs. He looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. You were fighting alone, Dr. Carter. You're not alone anymore. The words hit harder than Emma expected. She had been alone for so long, carrying the weight of injustice and anger and grief by herself, that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone on her side. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. We have a long fight ahead. Rashid stood, straightening his suit jacket. Now let's talk about what you're going to build for me. I want a cybersecurity system that makes everything currently on the market look like a child's toy. Can you do that? Emma smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she had felt in years. Yes, I can do that. The next 6 weeks fell into a rhythm. Emma worked 12-hour days, sometimes longer, losing herself in code and algorithms, and the pure satisfaction of creating something extraordinary. Rashid was demanding perfectionist and had impossibly high standards, but he was also brilliant in his own right, understanding her work in a way that made collaboration actually enjoyable. They argued constantly about approach, about implementation, about whether security or user experience should take priority. Emma discovered that Rashid respected pushback, that he actually seemed to enjoy being challenged. It was so different from Marcus, who had smiled and agreed with her ideas before quietly taking credit for them later. You're wrong, Emma said one evening, pointing at the screen where Rashid had suggested a modification to her encryption algorithm. That creates a vulnerability in the third layer. Anyone with advanced knowledge of quantum computing could exploit it. The vulnerability is negligible, and the processing speed improvement is significant. Negligible until someone exploits it, and we have a massive security breach. Speed means nothing if the system isn't secure. Rashid leaned back in his chair, studying her with those intense dark eyes. You're not afraid of me at all, are you? Should I be? Most people are. I'm not used to being told I'm wrong quite so frequently. Then most people aren't doing you any favors. You hired me for my expertise. Let me use it, he laughed, a sound she was hearing more often. Fine, we'll do it your way. But if the processing speed becomes an issue, I'm going to say I told you so. Deal. As they worked late into the night, Emma found herself noticing things she hadn't before. The way Rashid's expression softened when he was deep in thought. The rare, genuine smile that appeared when they solved a particularly difficult problem. The fact that he always made sure she ate dinner, ordering food from expensive restaurants and insisting they take breaks. Why did you really want to help me? Emma asked one night, the question escaping before she could stop it. You could have hired any cybersecurity expert in the world. Why go through all this trouble? Rashid was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. When I was 23, I had an idea for a new drilling technology that could extract oil more efficiently with less environmental damage. I presented it to my father's business partners, and they laughed at me, called me a naive child playing with toys. My father believed them instead of me. He turned to face her. I built my own company out of spite, proved them all wrong, and eventually bought out every single one of those men who had mocked me. But I never forgot what it felt like to have something valuable and be told it was worthless. When I saw you on that stage, solving a puzzle that had defeated everyone else and then walking away from my offer because you'd been burned before, he paused. I saw myself, and I thought, here's someone who deserves a chance to prove everyone wrong. Emma felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with professional respect. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. I have a reputation for being cold and calculating to maintain. Too late. I've seen behind the curtain. Their eyes met, and the air between them felt charged with something Emma wasn't ready to name. She looked away first, focusing back on her computer screen, but she could feel Rashid's gaze lingering on her for a moment longer before he returned to his own work. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when Marcus Whitfield walked into Emma's office. She looked up from her computer to find him standing in her doorway, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. He looked exactly the same: sandy hair, blue eyes, the charming smile that had once made her heart race and now made her stomach turn. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never faced real consequences. "Emma," he said, as if they were old friends, "I heard you were working here. I had to see it for myself. Get out." Her voice was ice. "Is that any way to greet your former fiancé? We were going to get married, remember? We were partners. You were never my partner. You were a thief." Emma stood, her hands clenched into fists. "How did you even get up here?" "I have connections. Columbia University has a consulting contract with Al-Maktoum Technologies. I'm here for a meeting." He stepped into her office, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about." "Oh, I think we do." Marcus's smile faded, replaced by something harder. "I know what you're doing, Emma. I know you're working with Sheikh Rashid to try to discredit me. My lawyers have already been contacted by his lawyers. It's not going to work. I have evidence. Timestamps, emails, original drafts, circumstantial. Nothing that will hold up in court. And you know it. You tried this before, remember? You lost." He moved closer, and Emma fought the urge to step back. "But I'm willing to make you an offer. Drop this vendetta, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and I'll make sure you have a comfortable life. I'll even give you a consulting credit on my next paper. We can both move forward." "A consulting credit?" Emma's voice rose. "That was my work, my research, my breakthrough. You stole 3 years of my life, destroyed my reputation, and now you want to offer me a consulting credit. I'm offering you a way out of a fight you can't win. Sheikh Rashid might be rich, but I have the entire academic establishment behind me. Who do you think they'll believe? The respected professor, or the bitter ex-girlfriend with an axe to grind?" The door opened. Rashid stood in the doorway, and his expression was colder than Emma had ever seen it. "Dr. Whitfield, your meeting was cancelled. Security will escort you out." Marcus turned, and for a moment fear flickered across his face before he masked it. "Sheikh Rashid, I was just catching up with an old friend. Dr. Carter is not your friend. She's my director of innovation, and you're trespassing in her office." Rashid's voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. "You have 30 seconds to leave this building before I have you arrested. You can't intimidate me." "I have rights." 20 seconds. Marcus looked between them, seemed to calculate his odds, and decided retreat was the better option. "This isn't over, Emma. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting you in the first place. Get out." He left, and Emma sank into her chair, her whole body shaking. Rashid closed the door and crossed to her side immediately. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I wasn't expecting to see him. How did he even get up here? He lied to security, said he had a meeting with the consulting division. I've already fired the person who let him through." Rashid's jaw was tight with anger. "He threatened you. He's scared. That means we're getting close. Close isn't enough. I want him destroyed." The vehemence in Rashid's voice surprised Emma. "No one threatens you and walks away unscathed." Emma looked up at him, at the protective fury in his eyes, and felt something crack open inside her chest. "Why do you care so much?" "Because you're brilliant and brave and you deserve justice. Because watching him try to intimidate you made me want to throw him out the window. Because," he stopped, seeming to struggle with words, "because somewhere in the last 6 weeks you became important to me, more important than I expected." The confession hung in the air between them. Emma's heart was racing, and she didn't know if it was from the confrontation with Marcus or from the way Rashid was looking at her, like she was something precious and worth protecting. "We should focus on the case," she said finally, not ready to examine the feelings swirling inside her. "If Marcus is scared enough to come here personally, we must have something that worries him." Rashid nodded slowly, accepting the deflection. "My investigators found 2 more victims. Former students of his who are willing to testify that he used their research without credit. We're building a pattern of behavior. That's good. That's really good, Emma. He waited until she met his eyes. I meant what I said. You're important to me, and I'm going to make sure Marcus Whitfield regrets ever crossing you. Emma believed him, and for the first time since this all began, she believed they might actually win. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of legal preparation, evidence gathering, and late nights in Rashid's office reviewing documents. The case against Marcus was growing stronger by the day. They had digital forensics proving Emma's original authorship, testimony from former colleagues, and a pattern of academic theft spanning a decade. But Marcus wasn't going quietly. He launched a counter-offensive, publishing an op-ed in a major academic journal, claiming that Emma was a troubled former student who had become obsessed and delusional after their relationship ended. He painted himself as the victim of harassment, a dedicated professor being targeted by a vindictive ex. The article went viral in academic circles. Emma's phone exploded with messages, some supportive, many cruel. Old colleagues who had abandoned her 3 years ago suddenly had opinions. The court of public opinion was vicious and divided. Emma sat in her office, reading the comments on the article, each one a small knife. She's clearly unstable. Why would a successful professor need to steal from a student? This is what happens when you mix professional and personal relationships. Stop reading that. Rashid took the phone from her hands gently. It's poison. They believe him. Just like before. It doesn't matter what evidence we have if everyone has already decided I'm the crazy ex-girlfriend. Not everyone. The people who matter, the investigators, the lawyers, the forensic experts, they all believe you because the evidence is irrefutable. He sat beside her on the office couch. Marcus is desperate. This article is a last-ditch attempt to control the narrative before we expose him publicly. What if it works? What if we present all our evidence and people still choose to believe him? Then we make the evidence so overwhelming that belief becomes irrelevant. We turn it into objective fact that can't be denied. Rashid's hand covered hers. I won't let him win, Emma. I promise you that. Emma looked at their joined hands, at the way his thumb was tracing small circles on her skin, and felt tears threatening. Why are you doing all this, really? It's more than just recognizing talent or righting an injustice. You've spent millions on investigators and lawyers. You've made this your personal mission. Why? Rashid was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. Because when I saw you walk onto that stage, knowing everyone was laughing at you and solve that puzzle anyway, you were the bravest person I'd ever seen. And then when you turned down my offer, refused to be bought or controlled, I realized you were also the most principled person I'd ever met. He turned to face her fully. I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, connections, power. You're the first person in decades who wanted nothing except to be left alone. And somehow that made me want to give you everything. Rashid, Emma's voice caught. I'm not good at this, he continued. I'm arrogant and controlling, and I've been told I'm emotionally unavailable. But you make me want to be better. You challenge me, you argue with me, you tell me when I'm wrong. You see me, not my money or my power, just me. And He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. I've fallen in love with you, Emma. Completely and inconveniently. Emma's breath caught. She had felt it too, the growing connection between them. The way her heart raced when he smiled, the way she looked forward to their late-night work sessions, the way his presence had become essential to her daily life. But she had been too afraid to name it, too scared of being hurt again. I'm terrified, she whispered. Marcus made me believe I was special, and then he destroyed me. How do I know you won't do the same? You don't, not with certainty. But I can promise you this. I will never take credit for your work. I will never diminish your brilliance. I will never make you feel small or invisible. And if you give me a chance, I will spend every day proving that you can trust me. Emma looked into his eyes, dark and intense and completely sincere, and made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. I'm falling in love with you too, and it terrifies me. Rashid smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Good. We can be terrified together. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, but Emma closed the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative and then deeper. 3 months of tension and connection and unspoken feelings pouring into it. When they finally pulled apart, Emma was breathless. "We should probably focus on destroying my ex-fiancé before we start a relationship," she said, but she was smiling. "Multitasking. I'm excellent at it." Rashid kissed her again, brief and sweet. "Besides, the best revenge is living well. And I intend to make sure you live extraordinarily well." The confrontation came 2 weeks later, in the form of a public hearing at Columbia University. Marcus had been formally accused of academic misconduct by 3 former students, and the university had no choice but to investigate. The hearing would be open to the academic community and live-streamed. A very public trial that would determine both their futures. Emma stood outside the hearing room, her hands shaking despite Rashid's steadying presence beside her. He had insisted on coming, had cleared his entire schedule to be there. His hand rested on the small of her back, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. "You're going to be brilliant," he said quietly. "Just tell the truth. The evidence speaks for itself. What if it's not enough? It will be. But even if somehow it isn't, you're still brilliant, still valuable. Still everything Marcus tried to make you believe you weren't. This hearing doesn't define you. Emma, you define you." She kissed him quickly, drawing strength from his certainty, and then walked into the hearing room. The room was packed. Faculty members, students, journalists, and curious onlookers filled every seat. At the front, a panel of 5 senior professors sat behind a long table, and across the aisle, looking confident and composed, sat Marcus Whitfield with his team of lawyers. Emma took her seat at the opposing table, flanked by Rashid's legal team, 3 of the best intellectual property lawyers in the country. The head of the panel, Dean Patricia Morrison, called the hearing to order. "We are here to investigate allegations of academic misconduct against Dr. Marcus Whitfield, specifically claims that he plagiarized research from former students and published it under his own name. Dr. Carter, you may present your case." Emma stood, and for a moment she was back on that stage at the gala, facing 500 people who thought she was nothing. But this time she had evidence. This time she had support. This time she would win. "Thank you, Dean Morrison. 3 years ago, I completed my doctoral thesis on quantum cryptographic algorithms at MIT. The research represented 4 years of intensive work and represented a significant breakthrough in cybersecurity. 2 weeks before I was scheduled to defend my thesis, my research partner and fiancé, Dr. Marcus Whitfield, published a paper containing my research under his name alone. She pulled up a presentation on the screen behind her. This is my original thesis draft, dated 14 months before Dr. Whitfield's publication. Note the timestamp and digital signature. This is irrefutable proof that I authored this work first. Marcus's lawyer stood. Digital timestamps can be manipulated. This proves nothing, which is why we also have these. Emma's lawyer produced a thick folder. Email exchanges between Dr. Whitfield and his colleague, Dr. Raymond Chen, where he explicitly discusses using Emma's algorithm and borrowing her breakthrough. We have testimony from 3 other former students who experienced similar theft. We have forensic analysis of Dr. Whitfield's computer, showing that he copied Dr. Carter's files directly. For the next 2 hours, Emma and her legal team systematically dismantled Marcus's defense. They presented evidence that was overwhelming in its thoroughness: digital forensics, witness testimony, pattern analysis, expert opinions. With each piece of evidence, Emma watched Marcus's confident expression crack a little more. Finally, it was Marcus's turn to defend himself. He stood and Emma saw the charm offensive begin, the apologetic smile, the reasonable tone, the carefully crafted explanation. "I deeply regret the pain this situation has caused Dr. Carter. We were in a relationship, and we collaborated closely on research. Perhaps there was some confusion about authorship, some miscommunication about who contributed what. But to suggest that I deliberately stole her work is absurd. I've been a respected researcher for 15 years. Why would I risk my reputation?" "Because you've done it before," Emma said, standing. "And you've gotten away with it before. But not this time." She pulled up a final slide. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen, who was your graduate student in 2015. This is her original research on neural networks, and this is your paper published 6 months later. using her exact methodology with no credit given. This is Dr. James Rodriguez, your student in 2017. His work on machine learning algorithms. Your paper 2018, same situation. You have a pattern, Dr. Whitfield. You find brilliant students, gain their trust, steal their work, and destroy them when they try to fight back. The room erupted in whispers. Marcus's face had gone pale. Those are coincidences. Similar research happening simultaneously. 3 students. 3 instances of theft. 3 careers damaged or destroyed. That's not coincidence. That's predatory behavior. Emma's voice was steel. You stole my work, my reputation, and 3 years of my life. But you couldn't steal my intelligence or my courage. And now everyone knows the truth. Dean Morrison called for order, and the panel conferred quietly for several minutes. Finally, she spoke. Dr. Whitfield, based on the evidence presented, this panel finds credible cause to believe you engaged in academic misconduct. Your employment at Columbia University is suspended pending a full investigation. The papers in question will be retracted, and Dr. Carter will be credited as the original author. Additionally, we will be referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges of fraud. Marcus stood abruptly. This is a witch hunt. You're destroying my career based on the word of a vindictive ex-girlfriend. We're holding you accountable based on overwhelming evidence, Dean Morrison said coldly. This hearing is adjourned. Emma felt her knees go weak. Rashid was at her side immediately, his arm around her waist, holding her up. You did it, he said, and there was pride and love in his voice. You won. Emma looked across the room at Marcus, who was being swarmed by reporters and angry colleagues. He looked small suddenly, diminished, all his charm and confidence stripped away. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a deep, profound relief that it was finally over. Let's go home, she said to Rashid, anywhere you want. 6 months later, Emma stood in front of a lecture hall at MIT, looking out at 200 students who were hanging on her every word. She was teaching a graduate seminar on advanced cryptography, and she had a waiting list of 300 more students who wanted to get in. Her research had been officially reattributed to her. Marcus Whitfield was facing criminal charges and had been blacklisted from every major academic institution. The 3 other students he had victimized had come forward publicly, and their work had been restored to them as well. Emma had received job offers from Harvard, Stanford, and MIT. She had accepted a position as Director of Innovation at Al-Maktoum Technologies, with a joint appointment at MIT, allowing her to both conduct cutting-edge research and teach the next generation of mathematicians. But the best part of her new life was waiting for her when she finished her lecture. Rashid sat in the back row, having slipped in quietly halfway through. He was supposed to be in Dubai for a board meeting, but he had rearranged his entire schedule to be here for her first day teaching. How did I do? Emma asked as they walked across campus together. You were magnificent. Those students have no idea how lucky they are. He took her hand, the gesture now familiar and comfortable. Though I have to say, watching you teach is incredibly attractive. Is that strange? Emma laughed. Coming from a man who finds mathematical proofs romantic, not at all. They had been together for 6 months, and it had been the happiest 6 months of Emma's life. Rashid had kept every promise. He supported her work without trying to control it, celebrated her successes without taking credit, and loved her with an intensity that still took her breath away. I have something for you, Rashid said as they reached his car. He pulled out a small velvet box, and Emma's heart stopped. Rashid, before you panic, it's not what you think. Not yet, anyway. He opened the box to reveal a key. It's the key to the new research facility I'm building. State-of-the-art equipment, unlimited budget, space for a team of 50 researchers. It's yours, Emma, to do whatever you want with. No strings, no conditions. Just a space for you to change the world. Emma felt tears streaming down her face. That's too much. I can't accept. You can and you will, because you're going to do incredible things, and I want to be part of making that possible. He cupped her face gently. I love you, Emma Carter. I love your brilliant mind and your fierce courage, and the way you argue with me about encryption protocols. I love that you make me want to be better, smarter, kinder. And someday when you're ready, I'm going to ask you to marry me. But for now, I just want to give you the world and watch you set it on fire. Emma kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. Gratitude and love and joy and the profound relief of being truly seen and valued. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through her tears. "I love you too. Even though you're arrogant and controlling and have terrible taste in coffee, my taste in coffee is impeccable. It's really not." They argued about it all the way to the car, and Emma thought about how far she had come. From invisible waitress to celebrated researcher, from stolen work to restored reputation, from broken and alone to loved and supported. She had proven herself in front of 500 people at a gala. She had fought for justice and won. She had found love in the most unexpected place, and now she had the resources and support to pursue her research without limits. Emma Carter had spent 3 years being invisible. She would never be invisible again. The final scene took place 1 year later, at another gala in the same ballroom where everything had begun. But this time Emma wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She wore a custom-designed gown in deep sapphire blue, and on her left hand, a 15-carat diamond engagement ring caught the light with every movement. She stood beside Rashid, now her fiancé, as they greeted guests at a celebration for the launch of her new research facility. The room was filled with the same type of wealthy, powerful people who had laughed at her 2 years ago. But now they looked at her with respect, with admiration, with the recognition she had always deserved. A young woman approached, nervous and starstruck. "Dr. Carter, I'm a graduate student at Columbia. I just wanted to say thank you. What you did, standing up to Dr. Whitfield, exposing him, you saved my career. He was my advisor, and after everything came out, I was able to transfer to a different program. You gave me hope that justice is possible." Emma took the young woman's hand. "You're going to do amazing things. Don't let anyone make you feel small or steal your work. And if they try, fight back. You're worth fighting for." The student left with tears in her eyes, and Rashid pulled Emma close. "You're changing lives. You know that, right? We're changing lives. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You could have. You would have. I just made it happen faster." He kissed her temple. "Though I'm very glad I got to be part of your story." A familiar voice interrupted them. "Dr. Carter, Sheikh Rashid, congratulations on your engagement." They turned to find Professor Harold Chen, the Harvard mathematician who had failed to solve Rashid's puzzle at that first gala. He smiled warmly. "I wanted to apologize for not recognizing your brilliance that night, Dr. Carter. I was too caught up in my own ego to see what was right in front of me." "Thank you. Professor Chen, that means a lot. I also wanted to extend an invitation. Harvard would be honored if you would consider giving a keynote lecture at our mathematics symposium next month. We'd love to hear about your latest research." Emma glanced at Rashid, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd be delighted." As Professor Chen walked away, Emma looked around the ballroom at the same crystal chandeliers, the same elegant decor, the same type of crowd. But everything had changed. She had changed. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" Rashid asked softly. "When I mocked you?" "If you're so smart, prove it," Emma smiled. "I was talking to you, but I was also talking to myself. I needed to prove that I was still the person I had been before Marcus destroyed everything. That I was still brilliant, still capable, still worth something. And did you? Prove it. Every single day." She turned to face him fully. "But the best thing I proved was that I could trust again. That I could love again. That not every powerful man would hurt me." Rashid's expression softened. "You proved something to me too. That intelligence without kindness is worthless. That true strength is being vulnerable. That the most valuable things in life can't be bought, they have to be earned through respect and trust and love. That's very poetic for a man who once told me emotions were inefficient. You've made me poetic. It's very inconvenient." Emma laughed, and they moved onto the dance floor as music filled the ballroom. As they swayed together, Emma caught sight of their reflection in the mirrored walls. A waitress who had become a doctor, a sheikh who had learned to love two impossible people who had found each other in the most unlikely way. "Thank you," Emma whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible. For believing me when no one else would. For loving me when I didn't think I could be loved again." Rashid pulled her closer. "Thank you for solving my puzzle. For challenging me. For making me want to be the man you deserve. For proving that sometimes the most brilliant thing you can do is take a chance on someone." They danced as the night sparkled around them. Two people who had both been broken in different ways, now whole together, Emma had proven her intelligence, reclaimed her reputation, and found justice. But more than that, she had found herself again, and found love in the process. The waitress who had been invisible was now impossible to ignore. The sheikh who had thought he needed no one had found someone he couldn't live without. And together, they were going to change the world. One equation, one breakthrough, one act of courage at a time. The end.